Now, keep in mind that I was raised in a city, so my experiences might be different from those who lived in the suburbs or the country. So, for me personally, life was very different back then than it is now, as you can imagine. I guess I'll start with the mornings. For being a child in the early 60s, waking up in the morning to get ready to go to school consisted of waking up from sleeping on the same bed with my older sister and in the same room as my younger brother. We only had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment where my parents had the other bedroom, so we kids had to share one room. All 5 of us in the household had to take turns using the one bathroom. Our morning time routine consisted of getting ourselves dressed to get ready for school at around 6 to 7 a.m. in the morning, where we would then have some sort of cereal with whole cow's milk. Back then, we did not have any other type of milk. We would then walk ourselves to school, which in my younger years, thankfully, was only a few blocks. But as I got older, we moved, and the school would then turn out to be about a half a mile away, which we would also walk to. We did not have any school buses for us, for our little area there, nor did our parents ever drive us to school. We'd be given a dime for milk money. And in kindergarten, we were obligated to take a nap, which, looking back is not a bad thing, on a little mat on our classroom floor. During my young school years, I was allowed to play outside with other neighborhood children in front of the building that we lived in, even though sometimes we'd sneak around the block where we'd always get caught and get in trouble by my parents. We didn't have a lot of homework compared to the kids nowadays. On Saturday mornings, we'd watch cartoons on our black and white TV, which was inside this ginormous console type furniture in the living room. And on Sundays, we'd walk to church. And there was only a couple of channels on TV. There was no cable, no internet, nothing like that. So you would put some antennas on top of the TV. I believe they were called rabbit ears antenna. So I'm sure you've seen them. I'm sure you've heard of them. They have a funny name. And that was it. We would just get a few channels, and the TV stations would go off at a certain time, all of them at night, and we'd only have, like I said, just one, I think maybe 2 the most, of children's channels on Saturday mornings, and the rest were just adult channels. Like one would be for the news, things like that. I just remember watching. Our favorite cartoons back then were what they had was, I believe, the Flintstones. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. The Jetsons. And I remember watching a show. It was like a a church show for children. It was something like David and Goliath, and they were kind of like Gumby type dolls, animated. And then, of course, we'd watch Gumby, of course, and then some superheroes, which were Superman and Batman, and my favorite was Aquaman, and they had Batman and Robin, and also, I'm trying to think if you guys can remember some of the cartoons from back then. Felix the Cat was one of my favorites also. Bugs Bunny. So they had those cartoons, and we had a show in the area that we lived in that was called Wonderama, and I believe it might have been a nationwide show. I'm not sure. If anybody else has heard of it, please let me know by commenting below. And so, getting back to what I was saying, On Sundays we'd go to church, and my dad did have a car that he would only use that car for special occasions. We only had one car for the family. That was it. And when we did get to ride in it, we were never required to wear seatbelts. Now, I don't know if that was the law or not, if it was enforced or not, but I just don't ever remember having to put on a seatbelt. And our shopping consisted of going to a five and dime like type Woolworth, where we would sit at a lunch or breakfast counter, whatever it was called, while my mother shopped. And on the main street were all the stores, and there were outside type stores. They were not, what I mean by that is like they were not inside like the malls. We didn't have malls back then. So you could go buy whatever you needed. There was usually one of two of everything. There was like a butcher shop, a few shoe shops, and shoe repair, because a lot of people repaired their broken shoes instead of buying them. It wasn't like now that you can just, buy a whole bunch of shoes and sneakers. We were lucky to get sneakers from Woolworth, and those were like the cheapest type, and I don't remember if we wore them out pretty quickly or not. I remember we would have to take care of our things because we were not rich. We had, my two parents worked, and they had us three kids, and it was expensive like it is still now. And so, but we were required to take care of our things, our clothes, our sneakers, our shoes. So if our shoes broke, they were taken into that shoe repair shop. I don't know if there's any more shoe repair places. I'm sure there are, but I haven't seen any, so I don't know. And so, like I was saying, on that main street, there was a post office, a couple of drugstores that had some also lunch counters where you could sit and get like a hamburger or a shake, and a couple of small time little restaurants, nothing fancy. And in those days, when you would go buy a pair of shoes, you had an actual salesperson, and the salespeople were mostly men, I remember. So they were like a salesman that would measure your feet and actually physically try your shoes on. And you'd have to get up and walk around, and he'd feel like your big toe through the shoe and ask you, how does the shoe feel? And Mom would, be looking and ask, and touch the back part, make sure it wouldn't give you like a blister in the back or something. And the type of shoes were so cute, because the fashion for the kids back then, for like going out shoes for girls, I don't remember what they were for boys, but for girls I remember they were like Buster Brown shoes was the brand. I don't know if that brand is still around. And they were like a black, shiny, I can't remember the name right now, but that was, and they had like a little strap. So that was it. That was really cute little shoes for girls. And I'm sure the boys had the same like Buster Brown type brand shoes. I just don't remember what they were called. And those were the shoes that you would get besides the sneakers. And you, of course, would have to change from your shoes, from when you come home from school, from your school shoes into your sneakers. If you to go play outside, you were not allowed to wear your good going out shoes. Those were reserved for school, for church, things, special occasions. So, and then another thing that was different was the cashiers in the stores rang up your items manually, and you would pay cash. There were no debit cards, and you had to actually know how to do math in your head to give back the correct amount of change, because there were no calculators or computers for the cash register. Was manual. There were no plastic bags for your purchases, only paper bags. And at home, everything was cooked on the stove because there was no such thing as microwaves. We also did dishes by hands. There was no dishwasher, at least not in our house. Our hands were the dishwasher. And we only had one landline telephone with a cord, and it was a rotary telephone. You would have to dial the rotary, and it was hanging up in a wall in the hallway. And there was no such thing as cordless anyway, so that's why it had this cord. And so to make a long distance call back then was a big deal. I remember that because you had to practically be rich. It was very expensive, and you couldn't dial it yourself. You could not dial a long distance call yourself. You had to actually dial for an operator first, or who would place the call for you, or she would get in touch with a long distance operator. Either way, I remember she would instruct you to, okay, hang up, and then she would call you back. And the operators back then were mostly women. Never remember speaking with a male operator. Just like I said, the salespeople for the shoes were men and the operators were women. For whatever reason, that's how it was. So while you were waiting for your long distance call to go through and the operator to call you back and ring your phone, you would just wait. You waited at home. You couldn't go out. Couldn't take the phone with you like our cell phones. So you would have to wait for however long it took. And sometimes the other line was busy or it was off the hook. And that's where the younger people nowadays get that saying off the hook thing. But that's what it was called back then. And so you would just wait and wait however long it took, and depending on how badly you wanted to make that long distance call. And the phone booths that I remember cost a dime. Later on, they went up in price. But in the time that I'm talking about, they were 10 cents to make a local phone call. I don't remember if you could make a long distance phone call in a public phone booth. I imagine you could. It would be also the same thing, kind of like getting an operator involved to make that call for you, and then you would have to deposit all this money through the phone. So you have to have a lot of spare change. Again, no debit cards, unless I guess that if you could charge it or reverse the charges. That's how they would call it. That was another thing. We don't hear anymore. Reverse the charges. Another thing that was different from now is that we all drank from the city water straight to the faucet, to the tap, in the kitchen, into your glass, into your mouth, into your body. There was no filter. And let me tell you, nothing bad ever happened to us from drinking that water. So whatever was in there, I don't know if it didn't affect us or we were vaccinated against it. I don't know, but that's how it was, and we didn't get sick.